It's Monday, January 18. This is the news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. A 48-hour curfew is now in place for Halesfield and Coffles in Clarendon. The curfew was imposed at 6 p.m. on Sunday and it is set to end on Tuesday at 6 p.m. The boundaries cover the areas along Racecourse Main Road from the Welcome to Coffles community sign to the Welcome to Halesfield community sign at the Halesfield Main Road. It goes along Coffles Main Road from the southern boundary to the Welcome to Coffles community sign at Racecourse Main Road. The public is being invited to make comments and provide recommendations on the draft Beach Access and Management Policy for Jamaica. The Beach Access and Management Policy will enhance foreign exchange earnings, employment opportunities, direct financial contribution for its protection, and additional environment management and planning. Minister of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change, Pernell Charles Jr., says the input of the public is critical to make the policy beneficial to everyone. Marlon Samuels has more in this report.
Jamaica's coastline is approximately 886 kilometers long and provides habitat for many of the island's living ecosystems, including sandy beaches, rocky shores, wetlands, seagrass beds and coral reefs. The draft policy highlights a number of areas, including increased physical access to the foreshore, the floor of the sea, and the water column above it. Consideration is also being given to relevant interests, including fishers, the expansion of beach-related recreational activities, pollution control, and safety for the protection of users of the coastal resources. So too factors affecting the island's beaches, including erosion from weather systems, climate change, and pollution from land-based sources. Virtual town halls on the draft Beach Access and Management Policy for Jamaica will be held for the public on January 26 and February 2. For the news on PBCJ, I am Marlon Samuels.
The government is developing a national identification system, NIDS, that will become the primary source for identity assurance and verification. The system is designed to improve the management of social, economic, and security programs. The legislation to support this, titled National Identification and Registration Act 2020, is broad-based and will affect other legislations already in law. The matter was discussed at the first of several virtual town hall meetings set to be held to inform the public about NIDS. Here's more in this report. Legislation that will be affected includes the Data Protection Act, Financial Administration and Audit Act, the Public Management and Accountabilities Act, etc. Justice Minister Delroy Chuck says the National Identification and Registration Act 2020 is being developed to work hand-in-hand with legislations already enacted into law, but some changes will have to be made.
When we pass laws, we recognize that they impinge on other laws. And to the extent that they impinge on other laws, if it's necessary to amend other laws, we do so, because the laws, all the laws must be consistent. They can overlap, yes, but they must not be inconsistent and they must not be in conflict. So that basically the NIDS Act will interfere with several pieces of legislation, and those persons who have the bill will see that in the fourth schedule it actually interferes with several pieces of legislation, such as the Access to Information, the Aliens Act, Children's Adoption Act, Education Regulations Act. So a number of other legislations are affected, and these legislations are actually listed in the fourth schedule of the bill. And they have to be consistent, because when we look at the Registration, Births and Deaths Act, yes, which comes under the Registrar General, then any changes will be made at the time that this bill is actually enacted in Parliament. It is the same with the passport regulations. All of these will be affected by this legislation, so that any changes that will be made to any other pieces of legislation, the Record Office Act, the Revenue Administration Act, the Matrimonial Causes Act, several other legislation, the Marriage Act, will be affected by this legislation, and any amendments will ensure that they're consistent with this act.
Wonderful. Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, explained that the bill does not only affect existing legislations, it also preserves matters which are addressed in other legislations.
I also wanted to just point out that it also preserves matters which are addressed in other legislation, like persons with disabilities.
That's very critical.
Under the Disabilities Act. This expressly says that when the NERA is conducting its obligations, that it must do so taking into consideration the needs of persons with disabilities as defined under the Act. I think that's, so it also preserves the obligations and rights and benefits which exist elsewhere.
The Justice Minister says the bill will begin to affect Jamaicans from birth.
It will affect children in a very positive way.
Yes.
So that once a child is born and the registration is done by the parent or parents, then the identification card, and this is in the Education Regulations 1980, will be affected. So that on page 62 of this bill, it says, insert next to the paragraph 3, the following paragraph. 4, the national identification card may be presented to verify the date of birth of a student. So to the extent that the national identification card will be used instead of a birth certificate, it will ease the burden of a lot of parents who oftentimes, in registering their children, have to be getting original birth certificate. Yes, they do have the original birth certificate, but oftentimes they can't find it.
Yeah.
But when, so when you have that national identification card, you just use it to show that this is the identity of the student and this is the date of birth of the student.
The bill takes into account the laws related to revenue in the country. The NIDS technocrats say under NIDS, tax and revenue offices can use the 9-digit national identification number for transactions.
The taxpayer registration authority having the option to designate the national identification number as their TRN. And that to me will reduce the number of identifying that will reduce the number of things that you need to identify yourself, because already we have some of that already in terms of your TRN being your driver's license.
Yes.
But to go further to say that your NIDS number will be the number that will be used for your TRN for the purposes of all your tax transactions, for the purposes of your birth, your marriage, your death transaction, will really put in a capsule all your data in one place, which will make for ease of movement and ease of business.
In addition to changes to legislation, data sharing agreements will also be established among government entities. The security of one's identity and personal information are two major concerns arising from the public discourse of the proposed National Identification System, NIDS. Under that system, a database of all Jamaican citizens will be established. Under NIDS, each citizen will be assigned a unique 9-digit national identification number for life. It is said to be used as a secure tool to verify an individual's identity in person or online. NIDS Program Director Warren Vernon says the biometric data will be encrypted to prevent unauthorized access.
The national identification system will be the most secured system to ever be implemented by the government of Jamaica. And the card itself will be the most secured card to ever be implemented by the government of Jamaica. And why am I saying that? Because we are spending a lot to improve the security framework. Yes. And for the technical people listening, we are implementing for the first time a national public-private key infrastructure, which will be the security backbone for the solution.
According to Mr. Vernon, the roles and functions under the program are separate to ensure identity security, reduction of identity fraud, and to safeguard the information of those enrolled.
We have to put in place, and we would have done so, the technology to detect these things before they happen, because they will happen. But where you're going to come out on top is the ability to detect them before and also to take corrective actions. And the framework, importantly, is covering a number of risk points. People, and I want to place emphasis on people, because people, your greatest risk surrounding individuals, not necessarily computer systems. Most of the breaches that you would have seen linked to people. So we will have strong measures in place to govern the actions of the people who work on the system. All of the assets, the technology, the data, and all of the technical capabilities that we are building surrounding the system are included in that framework. But to be very specific, some of the things that we are doing, your birth certificate information will be stored separately from your fingerprints and facial image. Your fingerprints will be kept offline encrypted, meaning that it will be very difficult, almost impossible for anyone to be able to access that data.
The NIDS virtual town hall meetings can be viewed on PBCJ's YouTube and Facebook platforms. The 71-page document can be downloaded from the Houses of Parliament website at www.japarliament.gov.jm. Between October and November 2020, Jamaica was affected by weather systems Eta and Zeta, which dumped inches of torrential rainfall on the island. The damage to farmers is estimated to cover $2.4 billion. There has been a subsequent hike in the price of ground provisions, vegetables and fruits due to shortages. Hot pepper prices increased from $250 a pound to, in some cases, $700 per pound. The price of lettuce, pak choy, cabbage, peppers, peas and tomatoes have been prohibitively too expensive for resale to customers. The new year has brought good news for consumers. Prices are trending down. More from Melvin Pennant.
St. Thomas is one of the island's least developed parishes. The parish is heavily agrarian. With many earning a living from the land, some vendors at the Moran Bay Market expressed great relief in the reduction in prices.
Right now, me I tell you the truth, me really happy with what I want with the reduced price of the things them. As you don't know, tomato did sky high, sweet pepper sky high. I want it for things sky high, but the things them drop now, right? So people can buy comfortable and feel comfortable. Everybody can have something in their kitchen where they can cook. Me really happy because me I tell you when the price them are, we couldn't even afford it. We not even make no money. We never either make any money, but me really happy with what I going right now. The price them gone down, the people them comfortable, everybody can eat food. Right? To God be the glory, great things he have done.
One item that saw a reduced price was tomatoes. Not everyone, however, welcomed the price cut.
Reduced price of tomato good for people. Good for we because we have make a little bit of fight. You can't put enough profit, not much money more than $120. When the tomato there, you can't put $50 per pound. Anything where there, you can't put more money on it. Like now it's cheap, there's no profit. More so. Well, it good for people, them. Why do you think the price drop? Well, the price drop because the farmer, them crop just come in through the long rain, and all the fruit, everything did go down. Now everything come up. So it's good for the people, them. No.
Despite the battering the crop sector has taken from the COVID-19 pandemic and torrential rains in 2020, however, according to Agriculture and Fisheries Minister Floyd Green, the island's farmers are staging a comeback. The cut in prices of some grown produce may be a sign of things to come in 2021. It is, however, still early days yet. Melvin Pennant, PBCJ News.
Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, is warning of grave consequences if rich countries continue to hoard COVID-19 vaccines. Speaking at the WHO's 148th Executive Board meeting on Monday, Dr. Ghebreyesus said not only does this approach deprive the world's poorest, it also puts the most vulnerable at risk. He also chided those countries who signed on to the COVAX facility while making side deals with vaccine developers. The WHO boss says over 2 billion doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have been secured, and COVAX stands ready to enact equitable distribution. But there's a problem.
In recent weeks, I have heard from several member states who have questioned whether COVAX will get the vaccines it needs and whether high-income countries will keep the promises they have made. As the first vaccines begin to be deployed, the promise of equitable access is at serious risk. More than 39 million doses of vaccine have now been administered in at least 49 higher-income countries. Just 25 doses have been given in one lowest-income country.
The COVAX facility was signed by over 100 countries to ensure equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. But some signatories have been making additional deals on their own. Dr. Ghebreyesus is warning of negative repercussions.
Going around COVAX, driving up prices, and attempting to jump to the front of the queue. This is wrong. 44 bilateral deals were signed last year, and at least 12 have already been signed this year. The situation is compounded by the fact that most manufacturers have prioritized regulatory approval in rich countries where the profits are highest, rather than submitting full dossiers to WHO. This could delay COVAX deliveries and create exactly the scenario COVAX was designed to avoid.
Dr. Ghebreyesus says this could lead to a chaotic market and an uncoordinated response to the pandemic.
Not only does this me-first approach leave the world's poorest and most vulnerable people at risk, it's also self-defeating. Ultimately, these actions will only prolong the pandemic, prolong our pain. The restrictions needed to contain it, and human and economic suffering.
He says it's not too late to correct this.
I call on all countries to work together in solidarity to ensure that within the first 100 days of this year, vaccination of health workers and older people is underway in all countries. We call on countries with bilateral contracts and control of supply to be transparent on these contracts with COVAX, including on volumes, pricing, and delivery dates. We call on these countries to give much greater priority to COVAX's place in the queue and to share their own doses with COVAX, especially once they have vaccinated their own health workers and older populations, so that other countries can do the same. Second, we call on vaccine producers to provide WHO with full data for regulatory review in real time to accelerate approvals. We also call on producers to allow countries with bilateral contracts to share doses with COVAX and to prioritize supplying COVAX rather than new bilateral deals. And third, we call on all countries introducing vaccines to only use vaccines that meet rigorous international standards for safety, efficacy, and quality, and to accelerate readiness for deployment.
Veteran singer George Nooks will be back in court in March. Mr. Nooks had his bail extended until March 4 when he appeared in the Kingston and St. Andrew Parish Court in Halfway Tree last week. He was arrested and charged for possession of cocaine and attempting to pervert the course of justice in April 2019. Time now for the business report with Gabriel Thompson.
In Friday's trading session, the JSE Combined Index advanced by 850 points to close at under 400,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 84 stocks, of which 36 advanced, 37 declined, and 11 traded firm. The Junior Market Index advanced by 22 points to close at under 3,000 units. Stocks advanced for 138 Student Living Jamaica, 1834 Investments Limited, and Barita Investments Limited. Stocks declined for Access Financial Services Limited, Cargo Handlers Limited, and Caribbean Cream Limited. Trading firm were AMG Packaging and Paper Company, Siboney Group Limited, and Derrimon Trading Company Limited. Jamaican Teas Limited was the volume leader with over 4 million units, followed by Derrimon Trading Company Limited with 3.1 million units, and Pulse Investments Limited with 2.5 million units. Now for the foreign exchange. The US dollar on Monday, January 15, ended trading at $144.81. The Canadian dollar sold for an average $118.44. The pound sterling traded for $198.34, and the euro ended trading at $179.32. Oil prices were mixed on Monday as a better-than-expected quarterly rebound for China's economy countered fears over soaring COVID-19 cases around the world and tight restrictions that could dent economic growth and field consumption. Brent crude futures fell 5 cents to $55.05 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate crude futures rose 4 cents to $52.40 a barrel. And that does it for this edition of the Business Report on PBCJ. I'm Gabrielle Thompson.
In regional news, St. Lucia's Ministry of Health has reported 32 new cases of COVID-19. Officials are again underscoring the importance of citizens keeping their guard up as the nation attempts to manage the rise in cases.
Over the past 5 days, the island has witnessed a surge in COVID-19 cases. Talks of an imminent shutdown due to the spike in cases have resurfaced. However, the issue of whether the country can survive a full shutdown remains a cause of concern for the government. Prime Minister Alan Shasney emphasizes the need for reducing social interaction to stop the spread of the virus.
What we need to recognize is that the sacrifice that we have to make is that we must minimize our social activities. And the government has continued to try to work with the population to make sure that we minimize the impact on our economy. Because there's no point in saving people if in fact their livelihoods are being affected. And we've repeated to say that it'll be a very difficult and daunting task for any government in the world to survive a full shutdown to the extent that we had in the months of April and May.
Shasney says there is no need for panic if St. Lucians continue to practice the infection and prevention control measures.
Protocols work. What is missing is our full application of those protocols. Every single time that we see that we've lapsed, we have an outbreak. But I'm glad to see that we're not panicking, and there is no need to panic, St. Lucia. We just need to wear our mask, practice social distancing, continue to hand sanitize, and make sure that everyone around us is doing the same thing.
The Prime Minister believes that the government and Health Ministry are managing the COVID-19 situation despite the recent increase in cases.
What we do know is how to handle the situation. We pretty much believe that what we have gone through in the last 6 months, more than likely the next 6 months is going to be a mirror image of that situation. And what does that? Means unpredictability. We don't know from one day to the next what is going to happen. And things are extremely fluid. But we have become accustomed to that here in St. Lucia, and certainly from the government perspective, we are prepared and we are able to manage the situation.
Chasney states that the public cannot allow COVID to define the country, and St. Lucians must rise to the challenge. He expressed confidence in the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sharon Belmar-George, Health Minister Mary Isaac, and the crisis management team in enforcing and implementing COVID-19 protocols. Colby DeVoe, HDS News Force.
The opposition APNU-AFC coalition in Guyana has written to the Chairman of Elections Commission expressing concern about the commission moving ahead with preparations for local elections without new registration period. More from News Source Guyana.
During a press conference today, Mr. Harmon, the opposition leader, said the Elections Commission appears to be heading to another claims and objections period without the proper cleansing of the voters list. He said the concerns about the list were behind the Commission's request for a meeting with the chairman.
We are not just any other entity. We are the APNUAFC. And so the chairman should understand that and understand what that means. She cannot just be meeting with people who come from overseas and all over, and you can't meet with us. We take umbrage to that position.
The chairman of the Elections Commission, Justice Claudette Singh, has said the APNU-AFC should meet with the entire commission and not just the chairman. Mr. Harmon said the opposition wanted to engage with the chair of the commission to remind her of the entities that came to observe the elections last year and the views they expressed about the voters list. He referenced the CARICOM Secretariat, the OAS, and the Commonwealth, and their views that there were problems with the voters list.
That the CARICOM review team felt that the list was a problem and it needed to be fixed. That the OAS felt the list was a problem and they basically stated that the attempt to cleanse the list was stopped. That was their full stop with them.
The opposition has now written to a number of international organizations expressing its concern about the Commission's move to head into local elections without adequately addressing the concerns about the voters list.
We were never consulted. This from the members of the Trinidad and Tobago Promoters Association. They're upset at the cancellation of Carnival 2021 as well as the narrative that promoters in the country are against following COVID-19 prevention measures. The promoters are asking those in charge to find alternative ways to promote Carnival 2021. There's more in this report from Crystal Wilson.
Trinidad and Tobago Promoters Association has noted with concern what it has deemed the recent narrative and public reaction to events being held since the onset of COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago. TTPA members met at Queen's Hall on Friday to address concerns raised by members of the public. Spokesperson for the TTPA, Paige De Leon, questioned the approach to events by certain sectors of society.
The playing field is not leveled. Because for us, any breach means we are flogged in the square of public opinion, our industry further trivialized with scoldings and threats, while others are given a free pass to create their own environments of risk.
Ms. De Leon said the TTPA stands in solidarity with their members who are among the many affected by the pandemic as they have lost their platforms to earn an income. She believes there are ways to approach providing entertainment. She added promoters are aware that the world has changed and they are on board with the changes.
We know there is a pandemic. It's impossible to ignore. We know we have to be responsible and do what is asked of us. We stopped the train. We are aware of the law, we respect why it is there, and we know what is required. We will continue to do our best like everyone in this society, but we are confused as to why the approach to our sector in particular is so unnecessarily heavy-handed.
TTPA President Jerome Presilla said there's disappointment among promoters as they were never consulted by those in charge about shelving Carnival 2021. Noting there's still time to plan a combined virtual and live event for Carnival, he said there are many ideas to be shared by those involved.
Things are different, things are changing, and we are seeing across the world where there are virtual events. I felt as though personally that we could have showcased Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival in a different way, and this would have actually been a greater selling point for our Carnival in the future to invite more tourists to come over to see that it's not only about the parade, but there are so many smaller elements of Carnival that we could showcase.
On Thursday, the TTPA met with Police Commissioner Gary Griffith and a team from the TTPS about virtual events and the need to maintain COVID-19 protocols. Crystal Wilson, TTT News.
In sports, international cricket could return to the region in 2021. Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, Olivia Grange, says the government is committed to a safe resumption of sports. Chief Executive Officer of Cricket West Indies, Johnny Graves, says the Windies will host Australia and Pakistan as part of the International Cricket Council's Future Tours program this year. The news comes as Windies gets ready to tour Bangladesh with the first of 3 one-day internationals in Dhaka on Wednesday. And that's the news on PBCJ. Thank you so much for watching.